The Snapshots Music and Arts Foundation presents a conversation with Sir John Tusa on the state of support for the arts and contrast between the British and American models of art support. Part 2.
What can musicians do to better stand up for their rights and establish what their services are?
My impression is that in the United Kingdom, the Musicians' Union is very powerful. The musicians as a group are very solid, and that they would be very wary of being, as you say, guilted, which I think is a good way of putting it, into doing free performances. I'm constantly, incidentally, appalled by how little musicians are paid, and you see these excellent musicians in small ensembles or in quartets, and the amount of money they get paid is actually frighteningly low. So the idea that they might then be asked to pay for free is completely unacceptable. I think if this is coming from the venues and the concert halls, I think all I'd say is, yes, you, the venue or concert hall, have a problem with funding. That's quite understood. But you're really not going to solve it by making the people who create the quality on your platform or stage play for free and actually grind them down. It's the wrong approach to a difficult question. What the particular answer is in any individual case, I can't say. But it's this instinct to grind wages down as if it's only the wages of the workers. I sound like a Marxist, but you know what I mean. So, i.e. the musicians, that are the cause of the trouble. They're not. There are many other causes. And I think, although it'll be hard, the musicians mustn't be bullied into it. But I'm sure that is easier to say than it is to do. But that, as I say, going back to the venues should say, what is the nature of our problem, and would we really solve it or even ease it a bit by squeezing the not very well paid musicians even more? I think the answer is it doesn't solve the problem. It could very well make it worse.
Now, that reflects a general public perception that even through hard times, the musical arts, for example, will flourish because musicians will not stop playing. They're inspired and they just love to play.
I think it's very dangerous. I think it is very unattractive. I think it is very complacent. I think it is untrue. And what that attitude would lead to would be to drive many musicians out of the profession altogether. It's simply not true that if you're a musician, you so need to play that you will play at any price and in any place. And what you would also be doing is to downgrade quality. At that stage, they'd say, yes, but what is quality? And I wouldn't even bother to get into that argument because it's such an inadequate response. And in any case, the business of musicians play because they are, so to say, inspired and they need to be, is completely untrue. Musicians are workers. And that's not to downgrade what they do. It is actually, in my book, to elevate it. And so you wouldn't say to any other worker, well, you have no choice but to work and you enjoy it, so why don't you do it for free the whole time? And if that's true for other workers, it's certainly true of and for musicians. But it sounds, if what you say is if the general status of the musical profession in the United States is dangerously low and very threatened, and that's very sad.
Yes, it's a complex picture here in the States, to be sure. I'd like to include a question to you that comes from a conversation with Professor David Duvall at the Juilliard Music School. And David's general feeling is that one of the greatest problems with our times today is the fact that people's attention is so consumed with technology, with being on the computer 24/7.
While I absolutely recognize the situation that he's described, and many people say it, and the next stage, one says, it's the end of the world as we know it, to the end of understanding as we know it, the end of appreciation as we know it. Something stubbornly inside me thinks, certainly hopes, and possibly believes that it's not quite that terminal. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. There is always a dialectic. It may take a long time, longer than perhaps we'd want, for the dialectical reaction to the digital social network environment to show itself. But it would be very surprising if that reaction didn't involve a rediscovery of all the things which now appear as if they're about to be lost through the welter of digital noise. And if people weren't continuing to go to museums, to concert halls, to festivals, to cinemas, in the numbers that they are, I would be much more worried. This may be hideously complacent, but I'm not prepared to hoist the surrender flag on that, not because I can say the situation he describes is wrong or inaccurate, but because I can't believe that there would be a beneficial, in my and your terms, response and reaction to it.
There's such a thing as burnout, where people actually get bored because there's no one. Maybe their friends are out and about, and there's no one on Facebook, so they might have to leave the house too.
Yes. Yes.
What setbacks and, shall we say, potential opportunities do you see in the global downgrade of funding support for arts organizations?
I think we just don't know. After all, if, as the governor of the Bank of England said last week, this is the worst financial crisis since the 1930s, if that's the case, then everything gets rewritten, and corporate support for the arts is only a minor detail in that entirely new scenario. We're not there yet. There will be a pinch. And in the case of the sort of mixed funding economy that we have in the UK, as you know, we always used to say a third public funding, a third box office and commercial, and a third from corporate and private. In some cases, the commercial and private now earns more. We're more robust in the way that we earn from the box office, and so the amount from corporate and private may be proportionately slightly less. What I think I'm saying is that there is more flexibility in the funding pattern, the funding picture that we have than there was, and that gives us some room for maneuver. You see, I'm sounding terribly not optimistic, but I've just refused to say that it's the end of funding and corporate giving and all that as we know it. There are still plenty of people with a lot of money who are, thank goodness, still giving, and who are still buying tickets and things like that. So there'll be a very awkward 5 years. It may be worse than that, but if a cataclysm is going to come, then it'll come in the world of finance first. And I don't think anybody knows when or if that is going to happen.
What would you say, in contrasting the British to American model of art support, are the benefits and possibly challenges to both models?
Well, the advantage of the British model is that you have 3 different areas where you can find your money, whereas on the whole of the United States it is 2 or sometimes largely 1. So you just have much more flexibility, and you have the opportunity to raise money in whichever the three areas seems most likely. So it's a more flexible model, and also it's a much more accountable model. If you're really working at your box office, both as far as getting the most money is concerned and also keeping prices affordable, you're very close to your audience, so you should be. And in the commercial area as well, it means that people have to think very much harder about how they run their organization, how they run their building. So you just have many more options. Yeah? You have many more options, and when one of those, one of the three legs of the tripod is threatened, you can always look to strengthen the other two. Whereas if you only have two legs to the tripod, still less one, when it goes down, it's just much less balanced. But the question of being closer to your audience and listening to your audience is very important. And also, we believe that the state should give money. There should be public support, and that is, of course, a very major difference between the European model, whether you want to call it the social democratic model, and the American model. It is a big difference, but it is a very, very important one. Governments should pay in part for the arts. So that's why I think we're increasingly comfortable with it, and I'm very dubious, and nobody I know thinks that, quotes, the American model is going to come over here. I think it's simply not deliverable, never mind the other objections. The other day, there's a friend who runs a very large organization here, where only 20% of his funding now comes from the government, and some of his more bullish board members were saying to him, look, it's only 20%, why did we tell the government to go to hell? Because we can easily raise that, the remaining 20%. And he's totally against it, and he's against it not because he thinks it's too risky, but mainly because he thinks it's wrong. He wants to have the tripod to work with, and I think that will always be a big, big difference with the United States.
Oh, one could make the argument that in the United States it was industrialists that built the country, and it seems to be industrialists who set the tone for major private giving.
Yes.
And you've spoken, Sir John, about the need for government and business investment in the arts. On what basis do you say this investment is a benefit and absolutely necessary to have a better society?
The basis of experience, I'm sure that there are numbers which can show this, but when you ask people about living in a community which has got just quite a useful arts or culture presence, they register quite high levels of positive response to the fact that it affects what they think about their community and how they feel about their community. There's always, so this isn't the prime reason for it, there's always the instrumental argument, which can sometimes be very, very dramatic. That is, you build a museum somewhere, a good museum, and it then lifts the whole standing and reputation of that particular community, with all sorts of benefits on people wanting to live there, house prices, so on and so forth. And the other day, I'll answer this by giving you a quote from somebody I was working with, who was about a young arts leader, and so the question of why have the arts, etc., came up, and he said, without the arts and culture, we are only survivors. So any community which doesn't have any artistic, cultural ingredient in it, what are people doing? They're just hanging on the life raft. Now, it's a slightly, maybe overly colored way of putting it, but people enjoy the arts, they use the arts. It does make a difference, and you can tell when you go to a community whether it has that sort of arts element in it or not.
Yes. That is probably the most powerful and succinct quote that I've heard about a statement for the arts in a long time.
I'm very glad.
Yeah, and that's exactly what David Duvall had, in my conversations with him, said. Are we just surviving as human beings, or are we really living a good life?
Yes.
Yes.
I will perhaps tell him that he's not the only person, so that his perception of what the picture of life without culture is identified and recognized by other people. I'm delighted he feels that way.
You served as managing director for London's Barbican Centre for
12 years, yes.
What are your current goals and activities in your life?
I'm now chairman of the University of the Arts London, that is its title, University of the Arts London, which is probably the largest arts, design, fashion university, certainly in Europe, possibly anywhere else. And I am the chairman of the Board of Governors, and I'm also chairman of the CLORE Leadership Program, that's CLORE, which takes 25 fellows every year, people who want to make the next step up towards arts leadership. And so it's the CLORE Leadership Program, and we give them an intense 8 months opportunity for learning. We don't teach, it's an opportunity for learning. So I've been doing that for 3 years now.
How do you spend your personal time being involved with the arts?
We go to a lot of chamber music at the Wigmore Hall, which I chaired for 10 years as well. And we go to a lot of galleries, actually, and art galleries and places. And we keep on saying that one of these days we're going to catch up with the movies, which, of course, I think, like everybody, we saw a great deal of when we were at university. It may be that it's too late to catch up with the movies for all sorts of complicated reasons. But when we see a good one, we really, really enjoy it. And architecture, looking at architecture, takes up as much time as we can. It's certainly a major interest.
That's wonderful to hear. I think anyone that is involved with the arts, appreciates that it's all time well spent, and it gives back as much and more as one gives it.
John, it has been a great pleasure speaking to you. And with these things, if one person reads or listens and says, yes, that's what I want to do, that's a victory, isn't it?
Thank you for listening.